Hi, this is Joy. I'm creating a series to discuss the journey I've taken while researching my family tree. In this video, I'm going to discuss where I started when I began this journey 16 years ago. When I was growing up, I was told that my father's side was Irish. I knew my paternal grandfather was from County Cork, Ireland, and that my paternal grandmother was born in New York, but that her parents were born in Ireland. So you can see here my paternal side, all in green, representing the Irish. But that's really all I knew about that side of my family. I also knew that my mother was half Italian, represented here in the red, because I knew my great grandfather came from the town of Lucca in Tuscany, and that my great grandmother's family was from the Emilia Romagna region of Italy. My mother's maternal grandmother came from British Guyana and immigrated to New York, represented here in yellow. That's the Portuguese side, because her family was of Portuguese descent, and possibly, I was told, Dutch, but not really 100% sure. More on that later. Her husband, my great grandfather, was named James Evergham, and he's represented here in orange, representing what we thought was English or Welsh ancestry. But he's a bit of a mystery. More on that later. I was also under the impression that all of my ancestors arrived in the US through Ellis Island's Immigration Center, which is now a museum, and I'm circling that here in the bottom right hand side. That's Ellis Island, straight across from Liberty Island and the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. Here's a little history about Ellis Island and the ancestors that I know came through it. Ellis Island was in operation from 1892 to 1954. The height of the Ellis Island immigration was in 1907. That was the same year my grandfather, John Mullane, was born in County Cork, Ireland, and he came to New York in 1927 at the age of 20. My maternal great grandfather, Julius, was born in Lucca in Tuscany, Italy in 1895 and came to New York as a child, and immigration records show him arriving at 2 years old in 1897. His wife, my great grandmother, was born in Emilia Romagna, Italy in 1896 and arrived also as a child. My great grandmother, Charlotte Veloza, was born in British Guyana in the 1890s. That's all I knew. And that she married in New York in the early 1920s. So I surmised that she must have arrived in the late 19 teens or early 1920s. And her husband, my great grandfather, James Evergham, was completely unknown, a bit of a mystery. But we thought he might have been English or Welsh, just not sure. Here's a little background on Ireland. Ireland is divided into 4 provinces. The province of Leinster is where Dublin's located. The province of Munster is where the city of Cork is located, also County Kerry. Connacht is the province where the city of Galway is located, and the province of Ulster is mostly composed now of the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, but also extends into County Fermanagh, and the cities of Belfast and Derry are located in Ulster. Here's another map of Ireland divided into its counties with the English name on top and the Irish name on the bottom. My grandfather was from here in County Cork. And I came to learn on this journey that my grandmother's family came from County Leitrim and County Fermanagh, which is now part of Northern Ireland. Here are a few photos from County Cork, the famous Blarney Castle with the Blarney Stone on the left, and to the right is a photo from the port of Cove, which is where many immigrants left Ireland from to come to Canada and the United States. Here are some photos of my grandparents, John Mullane and Rosanna Jackson Mullane. This is them on their wedding day, obviously. Here's them as a young couple on the beach. Here's several years later, where this is my grandmother Rosanna here with the short dark hair. And these are her parents who were born in Ireland, Frank Jackson and Mary Agnes Maughan. Also featured in this photo is my Aunt Maureen and my Uncle Dennis. My father is the youngest and obviously not born yet. Here's a photo of my grandparents at my parents' wedding. And this is a photo of my grandfather on his last trip to Ireland in 1986. Here's a short general history about Ireland. In ancient times, Ireland was ruled by the Celts. Then came the early Christian age when St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. There were hundreds of years of Viking invasions, followed by the Anglo-Norman rule. This was under the Plantagenets. Then the early modern and plantation era came under the Tudors, Cromwell, and the Stuarts. And the decisive Battle of the Boyne led to the Protestant ascendancy, which lasted from 1691 to 1800. During this period, Ireland was under British rule and under the penal laws. The penal laws forbade Catholics from owning property, voting for members of parliament, from being educated, from speaking the Irish language, and from worshiping in Catholic churches. In 1800, the Act of Union was passed and Ireland formally became a part of Great Britain. Ireland was under the rule of Great Britain from 1800 until 1921. That was during the rule of the Stuarts, the House of Orange, and the Hanoverians. My grandfather, John Mullane, was born in 1907, so from ages 0 to 14, he lived under British rule and was a British subject. During this period under British rule, many events took place. The most famous one was the Great Hunger, or what we call the Potato Famine, from 1845 to 1849. 2 million Irish left Ireland, mostly for America and Canada. Another million Irish died, and the population went from 8 million to 6.5 million. That's over 20% loss in population. Then came the Revolutionary period, starting with the Easter Rising in 1916. Then there was World War I, which interestingly, because Ireland was still under British rule at this time and hadn't gained its independence yet, many Irishmen were drafted into World War I and conscripted into the British Army and Navy. Many of those people came back and fought in the War of Independence against the British and took what they learned as members of the British Armed Forces to fight against the British in the War of Independence. This was followed by a terrible period, the Irish Civil War, and then the partition of Ireland. My grandfather was aged 9 to 16 during this tumultuous time of the Revolutionary period in Ireland. Ireland became part of the Irish Free State from 1922 to 1937 and was a dominion of the British Empire under the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1922, which was negotiated by Michael Collins. My grandfather lived under the Free State from ages 15 to 20, and he emigrated at age 20 in 1927. In 1949, Ireland became completely separate from Britain as a republic. Northern Ireland, those 6 counties, remained a part of the UK still to this day. In 1949, when the republic was formed, my grandfather was living in New York. He was a U.S. citizen by this time and aged 42. My father was a year old. Next comes my mother's paternal side of the family, who are all from Italy. As you may know, Italy used to be separate regions, separate kingdoms, and became a united country in 1861. My great-grandfather Giulio, or Julius, came from Lucca in Tuscany. A little history about Tuscany and the Lucca region. Tuscany was ruled in ancient times by the Etruscan civilization. The Roman Empire then ruled it until its collapse. Then it was under Lombard Frankish rule for several hundred years. Then came the age of the Italian city-states. During this period, from 1100 to 1499, Lucca fell under several different city-states, back and forth, between Pisa, Florence, and its own city-state. It then joined the Tuscan League in 1118, which lasted until 1197. And like I said, there were many shifts between the city-states during this period. The Medici ruled over this area from 1434 to 1569, and then Lucca fell under the Grand Duchy of Tuscany, under the House of Medici and the House of Lorraine for the next couple of hundred years. For Lucca individually, Lucca constructed its city walls in the late 1590s to early 1600s, and then Napoleon's French forces took over from 1800 to 1815, and Napoleon installed his sister to rule over Lucca. Then came the Bourbon-Parma family, and then Ireland. Then Lucca became part of the Grand Duchy of Tuscany at this point. And then, of course, it joined all together with Italy in the unification in 1861. My great-grandfather was born in 1895. His parents were born in 1865 and 1866, respectively. So all of them were born under the unified Kingdom of Italy. Here are some photos of my family. This lady in the top left-hand side is my great-great-grandmother, Cortese Banchieri. She is the mother of my great-grandfather, Julius. And Cortese is someone that both my mother and I look very much alike. On the top right, this is my 3 times great-grandparents, Giuseppe Ferrari and Guidetta Maffi. They are the maternal great-grandparents of my great-grandmother, Maria Edwina Tagliaferri. And here are my great-grandparents, Julius and Maria, later called Mary, on their wedding day. And this is them in their elder years. This photo actually sits in the collection of the Museum of the City of New York. And it was taken at a senior center in Queens. Here's a map of Italy showing the regions and regional capitals. Here in brown, you can see Tuscany, which has a coastline along the Mediterranean Sea, and its capital is Florence. That's where my great-grandfather Julius is from. My great-grandmother Mary was born in Emilia-Romagna, near the town of Piacenza, and the capital of Emilia-Romagna is Bologna. Here are some photos of Lucca in Tuscany. As I mentioned earlier, these are not photos I have taken, but I did go there in 2008. And because of all the wars between the city-states, The Lucchese built a barrier wall around the city, a rampart, really, and I actually took a bike ride all along the top of the wall around the city. And here's a view. It looks like this photo must be from a drone because it's definitely higher than the city walls. You can't really see the city walls here, but they're back behind this tree line here. And you can see the town of Lucca in Tuscany, and its main cathedral of San Michele. Here's a map of Tuscany, and Lucca is here in the northwestern part of Tuscany. It's a very close train ride from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and here on the coast is the town of Livorno, which is very close to the famous Cinque Terre region here along the coast. To the very far northwest is the town of Carrara. I actually took a train ride through Carrara, and you can see the cliffs where the famous Carrara marble comes from. Florence is obviously the capital of Tuscany and its main city. Many other Americans have visited the hill towns of Siena, Montepulciano, Cortona, and Siena. Here's a little history about Emilia-Romagna. An ancient Celtic tribe once ruled over Emilia-Romagna, and then the area became under the rule of the Etruscans, much like Tuscany. That's where the name comes from. It also was under Roman Empire rule, and then under the Lombardy Kingdom, which is the region to the north of Emilia-Romagna, with its capital of Milan. In 754, it became one of the papal states. Then in the late 1090s, early 1100s, it was ruled by a Matilda of Cassona. I haven't done much research on her, but I'm really interested to find out about this period. Then it came under the Este dynasty in 1200s, and then it became part of the Duchy of Parma and Piacenza, which was ruled from 1554 to 1796 by a Spanish branch of the Bourbon-Parma family. Napoleonic forces invaded and ruled from 1796 to 1814, much like in Lucca. From 1815, after the fall of Napoleon, till 1859, this region was split between the Papal States, the Bourbon-Parmas, and the Austria-Este family. And it also became unified under the Kingdom of Italy in 1859. Piacenza, where my great-grandmother's family's from, was a Roman colony, a Papal state. Then it was ruled by the Farnese family and the Bourbon-Parma family, with periods of French and Austrian rule and influence. Here are some photos. It was very hard to find any that weren't part of the Shutterstock, but here's where the Emilia-Romagna region lies in Italy, just to the north of Tuscany, to the south of Lombardy. And from west to east, here's Piacenza, the area where my great-grandmother's family came from, to the far western region of Emilia-Romagna. Next comes Parma and Reggio Emilia. These areas, of course, very famous for their food. The prosciutto di Parma ham comes from this region, Parma ham, as well as the Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Modena is very famous for its balsamic vinegar. And Bologna is the capital of this region, and it's, of course, famous for its mortadella, which we call bologna in America. It's also very famous for the home of tagliatelle pasta, bolognese meat sauce, tortellini, and lasagna. This region also gave the world famous automobiles such as Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, and Ducati. Here are some photos from Piacenza. I haven't had the opportunity to visit, but it is definitely on my list. In this photo at the top left, you can see this very Tuscan influence in the architecture. It looks very similar to Lucca in this photo and parts of Florence. And then the building at the bottom right, this pink building with the military statue here, is very reminiscent of French and Austrian influence in architecture. Next, we move on to my great-grandmother's family. She came from British Guyana, which is now independent and called Guyana. And you can see it situated here on the Atlantic coast of South America. It lies between Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname. Its capital is Georgetown, and the vast majority of people live in this coastal region. The inward part, interior of Guyana, is mostly rainforest. A little history on British Guyana, now Guyana. It was inhabited by indigenous tribes, including the Waros and Caribs. That's where we get the name Caribbean from. In 1498, Columbus sighted the Guyana coast. In the 15 and 1600s, the Dutch established a trading post and colonized Essequibo and Berbice in Guyana, which are some of those coastal regions. In the 1620s, the Dutch West India Company began to import African slaves to work on sugar plantations. From 1796 to 1814, this was the era when the British seized control from the Dutch. Then, formalizing in 1831, the regions of Berbice, Essequibo, and Demerara were united under British rule as British Guyana. And most of my family seems to come from this Demerara region. Slavery became abolished over a 4-year period, 1834 to 1838. In 1835, the first Portuguese from Madeira arrived in British Guyana to escape poverty, a devastated potato crop, and overpopulation of the island. There were also many civil wars that occurred, and part of the reason the Portuguese came to British Guyana was there was a long-standing trade relationship between Britain and Portugal. 1838 to 1917 was the era of indentured servants arriving to British Guyana. These indentured servants came from India, Portugal, Madeira Island in particular, and China. My great-grandmother Charlotte was born in 1894 in Demerara, Mexico, and she immigrated to New York in 1922. Her sister, Louise, stayed behind in Guyana, and she had children with a man of Dutch descent named Timothy van Sleutman. There was an independence movement from 1950 to 1961, and the establishment of the country of Guyana came with independence from the British in 1961. Here we have a photo of my great-grandmother. It's the only one that I have, and my great-grandfather in their older years. This is Charlotte Veloza, who came from British Guyana to New York, and her husband, James Evergam. These are their 4 children: my grandmother, Henrietta, her sister, Gloria, Helen, and Teresa. Teresa is the only one still living, and she's 92 years old. This is a photo of the capital of Guyana, Georgetown. And here is Guyana's most famous site, the Kayatur Falls. Is one of the tallest single-drop waterfalls in the world, and it lies 240 kilometers southwest of the city of Georgetown, deep in the rainforest, as you can see. I was told growing up that the Velozas were Portuguese, But I soon learned when I began this research that they were actually from the Portuguese island of Madeira. And you can see in the bottom right here, Madeira circled, lying between the Cape Verde Islands and the Azore Islands, which were all under Portuguese rule at one point. Portugal lies here on the Iberian Peninsula, so Madeira is actually a little closer to Morocco than it is to Portugal. And here's a more modern day photo of the airport in Funchal, Madeira, the only airport on the island. And it's supposed to be one of the toughest approaches for pilots. There's a nasty crosswind there. Here are some more photos from the island of Madeira, modern day obviously. It just looks so idyllic, kind of a cross between Hawaii and the Mediterranean, and I hope to visit there one day. So this last slide is just to introduce you to my great-grandfather, James Evergam. He's a bit of a mystery. Over the years, we were told that he was orphaned. Then other people in the family said, yes, he was orphaned. He lived in an orphanage for a period of time. And then an aunt and uncle came and got him and adopted him. But we didn't know if Evergam was his father's last name or maybe this aunt and uncle's last name who came and got him. Other people thought that he was born in England and was an orphan there, and that he hopped a boat when he was 17 or 18 and came to America. Other people said, we're not sure if it's northern England or Wales or somewhere in that region. Others said, no, he was born in the United States in either New York or New Jersey, and that he was orphaned and then adopted by an aunt and uncle. In a future video, I will discuss how much of this is true, how much of this is false, and what I learned in my research. Thank you very much.